7 cousins vanished at a North Carolina lake in 1997. FBI finally uncovered the truth 25 years later. It was a bright summer morning in 1997 when 7 cousins, ranging in age from 12 to 21, decided to spend a weekend at Lake Hollow, a serene but isolated spot in North Carolina. Laughter echoed across the water as they set up tents, fished, and planned adventures that would forever be etched in their memories, or so it seemed. By nightfall, something was terribly wrong. The cousins never returned from the lake. Initially, the local authorities suspected a boating accident or an animal attack. Search parties scoured the area for weeks, but the dense forest and vast waters swallowed any trace of the young group. The town fell into a somber silence, haunted by the unanswered question, what happened to them? Years passed, families grieved, and the case went cold. The local news occasionally revisited the story, stirring fleeting hope, but no concrete leads emerged. Then, 25 years later, a breakthrough came when the FBI reopened the investigation after receiving an anonymous tip. Advanced forensic techniques, digital evidence, and a network of informants finally began to unravel the mystery. The investigation revealed a chilling truth. The cousins had unknowingly stumbled upon a hidden criminal operation in the forests surrounding Lake Hollow. They had seen something they shouldn't have, and those responsible had orchestrated their disappearance with terrifying precision. The evidence found after decades allowed the FBI to track down the perpetrators, who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Families, friends, and the nation were shaken. The lake that had once symbolized summer freedom now stood as a silent witness to unspeakable crimes. Finally, justice was served, but the scars of that night lingered. The story of the 7 cousins became a stark reminder of how time cannot erase truth, and how determination can uncover even the darkest secrets hidden for a quarter of a century. Introduction and hook. It was the summer of 1997, and the sun shone brightly over the rolling hills of North Carolina. Families across the state were enjoying the warmth of long days, and among them were 7 cousins, all eager for adventure. They were full of youthful energy, laughing as they packed their belongings into cars, unaware that this weekend trip to Lake Hollow would become a defining moment in history. Lake Hollow was known in the local area for its serene beauty. Nestled among thick forests and towering pines, its calm waters reflected the sky like a mirror. Locals often described it as a perfect escape from the chaos of daily life. The cousins, ranging in age from 12 to 21, imagined days of swimming, fishing, and exploring the forest trails that skirted the lake. It was supposed to be a carefree retreat. As they drove closer to the lake, excitement buzzed in the car. Conversations overlapped, teasing and laughter filled the air, and their parents waved goodbye, unaware that this trip would soon plunge them into uncertainty. The cousins joked about who could catch the largest fish or stay awake the longest telling ghost stories around a campfire. Every moment was ordinary, but ordinary can sometimes conceal the unimaginable. Upon arrival, the cousins were greeted by the stillness of the lake and the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. They quickly set up tents, arranged their sleeping bags, and unpacked coolers of snacks. The air smelled of pine and water, and the forest seemed alive with the sounds of birds, frogs, and insects. To any onlooker, it was a perfect summer scene. Yet, beneath the idyllic exterior, the isolation of the lake carried an invisible tension, an unspoken vulnerability. Afternoon passed into evening, and the group decided to explore the lake by rowboat. Laughter echoed as they playfully splashed water at one another. Some wandered along the shore, discovering small coves and hidden trails. There was an adventurous thrill in the air, a sense of freedom that comes from being surrounded by untouched nature. But in that very freedom, danger quietly lurked, waiting for an unsuspecting moment. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the cousins gathered by a campfire. Stories were told, jokes cracked, and the atmosphere was one of absolute normalcy. No one could have predicted that within hours, the laughter would be replaced by confusion, worry, and despair. The night that began with warmth and camaraderie was about to shift into a terrifying unknown. Nearby, the forest seemed to grow darker and more foreboding. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the water's surface, and the gentle rustling of leaves felt almost like whispers in the wind. The cousins, young and unaware, remained oblivious to the subtle signs that the night might hold dangers beyond their imagination. The lake, so tranquil during the day, now carried an eerie stillness. The atmosphere was further intensified by the isolation of the area. Lake Hollow was far from any major road, and cell phone coverage was nearly non-existent in 1997. If something went wrong, help would not come quickly. This isolation, which had initially been part of the charm, now created a chilling vulnerability, setting the stage for the mysterious events that would soon unfold. As darkness deepened, the cousins decided to prepare for bed, unaware that this night would change their lives forever. They were excited, tired, and restless, but no one sensed the gravity of what was about to occur. The campsite, once filled with vibrant energy, now seemed quiet, almost anticipating the unseen forces that were about to intervene. Every sound of the forest became magnified. Every shadow cast a potential threat. And then, as the night fully embraced the lake, the ordinary summer evening slipped into the extraordinary. The 7 cousins would vanish without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and an entire community gripped by fear. What began as a joyful trip had silently transformed into a mystery that would remain unsolved for decades, setting the stage for one of North Carolina's most chilling disappearances, the Disappearance. As night fell over Lake Hollow, the cousins settled into their tents, laughter fading into quiet whispers. The gentle lapping of the water against the shore created a soothing rhythm, but the stillness of the forest began to feel heavier, almost oppressive. No one knew it yet, but this ordinary night would take a terrifying turn. Around 10 p.m., one of the older cousins suggested a short walk to the water's edge to check on the rowboat. The group agreed, thinking it would be a harmless adventure under the silver glow of the moon. Flashlights cut swaths through the darkness, illuminating only small patches of the forest floor, leaving the rest to the imagination. Each step seemed heavier than the last, but the excitement of being alone in the wild kept them moving. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the far side of the lake. It was sharp, brief, and alarming. The cousins froze, shining their lights in the direction of the sound. But there was nothing, just a reflection of the moon on the calm water, the silhouettes of trees, and a silence that seemed to press against them. The moment passed, yet it left a sense of unease that none could shake. The group split up slightly to investigate, their calls echoing faintly through the forest. The youngest cousin, clutching a flashlight, stumbled over a hidden tree root and fell, crying out for help. As the others rushed to assist, they realized something chilling. 2 of their number were missing from sight. Panic began to creep in, but they assumed it was a temporary separation in the darkness. Within minutes, confusion turned into alarm. One by one, the remaining cousins began to vanish. Calls and shouts went unanswered. Flashlights swung across the shadows, revealing only empty patches of forest and the silent, glimmering lake. No footprints, no sounds, no signs of struggle. Only an unsettling emptiness where moments before there had been life and laughter. Back at the campsite, the remaining family members who had stayed behind grew increasingly worried. They had heard nothing from the cousins, and the eerie silence of the forest at night offered no comfort. A quick search began with torches and makeshift calls, but as the minutes stretched into hours, the realization struck. This was not a simple case of getting lost. Something more sinister was at play. By midnight, the local sheriff and emergency services were called. The forest was combed systematically, boats dragged to the water, and every possible hiding spot examined. Yet, the night swallowed the cousins completely. Their disappearance left behind only tents, backpacks, and a few scattered personal items. It was as if they had vanished into thin air, leaving a trail of fear and confusion in their wake. Neighbors and townspeople joined the search at first light. Helicopters circled above, trained dogs sniffed through underbrush, and volunteers scoured miles of lakefront and forest. But even in daylight, the cousins were nowhere to be found. The serenity of Lake Hollow seemed unchanged, almost mocking, while the terror of the night lingered in the hearts of those left behind. Theories began to circulate. Had there been an accident on the lake? Could an animal attack have occurred? Or had something more malevolent taken place? Every possibility seemed plausible, yet none could explain the complete disappearance of all 7 cousins without a trace. The forest, once a place of adventure, now became a labyrinth of unanswered questions. Days turned into weeks, and despite exhaustive searches, the cousins remained missing. Families faced the unimaginable, wondering, hoping, and fearing simultaneously. The entire town was gripped by the mystery, whispers of the unexplained spreading like wildfire. What began as a joyous summer trip had transformed into a chilling enigma, setting the stage for a case that would remain unsolved for decades, haunting everyone who had ever known them. Community impact. The disappearance of the 7 cousins did not just affect their families. It shook the entire community of North Carolina to its core. Lake Hollow, once a place of summer joy and peaceful retreat, became a symbol of fear and uncertainty. Neighbors whispered about what might happen, and the small town, usually close-knit, found itself gripped by tension and suspicion. Parents of other children grew, wary of letting their kids play outside or visit the lake. The carefree atmosphere of summer was replaced by anxiety. Every shadow in the forest, every ripple on the water, became a potential threat. People began locking doors earlier, watching the streets with unease, and questioning whether they truly knew the safety of their own town. Community meetings were held to organize search parties and coordinate with law enforcement. Volunteers poured in, bringing flashlights, boats, and tracking dogs. Local news outlets reported constantly on the investigation, broadcasting images of the missing cousins and interviews with distraught family members. The town's collective hope and fear mingled with each new update, or lack thereof. The psychological toll on the families was immense. Parents relived the last moments they saw their children repeatedly, unable to reconcile the normal summer day with the horrifying void that followed. Siblings, cousins, and friends waited in tense anticipation, each day, without news deepening the sense of helplessness and despair. Grief became a constant companion, even for those not directly related. As weeks turned into months, the sense of community shifted. Some residents began to close off, refusing to speak about the case out of fear or hopelessness. Others became obsessed with finding answers, patrolling the lake themselves or searching the woods. The disappearance fractured the town's sense of security, turning neighbors into silent witnesses, a mystery they could not solve. Rumors spread like wildfire, some plausible, others impossible. Some claimed the cousins had run away. Others whispered a tragic accident, and darker voices suggested foul play. Every theory stirred fear and mistrust. The line between truth and speculation blurred, leaving the community trapped in a haze of suspicion and unease. Local schools were affected too. Teachers noticed students distracted, anxious, and unable to concentrate. Some children were afraid to speak openly about the event, while others couldn't stop talking about it. The disappearance became a shadow over daily life, infiltrating classrooms, playgrounds, and social gatherings. The town itself felt as though it was collectively holding its breath. Annual town events and gatherings, once lively and celebratory, became subdued. People no longer felt safe holding picnics near the lake or hosting large outdoor activities. Even casual conversations carried a tone of caution and remembrance, as if the forest and the lake were silently watching, and no one could escape the memory of the missing cousins. Over the years, the community became defined by the unsolved case. New residents were told the story as a cautionary tale, while those who had lived there for decades spoke of it with a mixture of sadness and fear. Every time someone mentioned Lake Hollow, it invoked memories of those summer days that ended in tragedy, a reminder that life could change in an instant without warning. Despite the fear, the case also brought out remarkable resilience. Community members who organized searches, comforted grieving families, and shared information displayed a unity born from tragedy. Yet, the lingering mystery left an undercurrent of suspense that never dissipated, embedding the disappearance of the 7 cousins deep into the town's history and consciousness, a story that would wait decades for resolution. Cold Case Era. As months turned into years, the initial frenzy surrounding the disappearance of the 7 cousins began to fade, but the mystery itself did not. The case transitioned from an active investigation to what law enforcement terms a cold case, a haunting file on a desk, filled with unanswered questions, photographs, and leads that went nowhere. For the families, however, the time did nothing to dull the pain or the hope that their loved ones might still be found. Local authorities, constrained by limited resources and technology of the late 1990s, struggled to make progress. Each potential lead seemed to dissolve into dead ends. Witnesses' memories faded. Physical evidence was minimal, and the dense forest surrounding Lake Hollow continued to conceal secrets. The investigation stalled, leaving law enforcement frustrated and the community frustrated, yet helpless. During this era, the story of the missing cousins became a cautionary tale whispered among locals. Teenagers would dare one another to venture near the lake, while parents forbade any excursions beyond the well-trodden paths. The legend of the disappearance grew, layered with rumor, speculation, and fear. Over time, the line between reality and myth began to blur, making the case seem even more mysterious. Law enforcement kept the case on record, occasionally reviewing old notes and photographs, hoping a fresh perspective might uncover something new. Every few years, a spark of renewed attention, such as a tip from a stranger or an unexplained piece of evidence, would briefly ignite hope. Yet, each wave of optimism ended the same way: frustration, uncertainty, and silence. The town learned to live with the unresolved grief, though the missing cousins never left their minds. Technological limitations of the era played a key role in keeping the case cold. DNA profiling was in its infancy, surveillance cameras were rare, and digital records were virtually non-existent. Many avenues of investigation that could have been pursued today simply weren't feasible. Investigators could only rely on eyewitness accounts, the sparse physical evidence collected, and painstaking manual record-keeping, making the pursuit of truth agonizingly slow. Meanwhile, the families of the missing cousins faced social and emotional challenges. They endured endless questions from neighbors, reporters, and strangers alike. Each break in the investigation, however minor, brought a temporary surge of hope followed by crushing disappointment. They learned to navigate grief as a daily companion, never fully letting go of the possibility that their children might still return. The passage of time changed the landscape of suspicion as well. Friends, acquaintances, and even distant relatives who might have once been considered potential sources of information gradually moved away, leaving fewer eyes on the mystery. The trail grew colder not just because of evidence, but because human memory, relationships, and connections faded with time. The disappearance became a puzzle with missing pieces that seemed irretrievable. Public interest in the case shifted too. Newspapers occasionally ran retrospective stories, especially around anniversaries of the disappearance, but the headlines were often buried beneath newer tragedies and local events. The story that had once consumed the community slowly became a historical footnote, a haunting one, but a footnote nonetheless. Yet, in the shadows of Lake Hollow, the questions remained unanswered and pressing. For investigators, the cold case era was as much a test of patience as skill. They meticulously cataloged evidence, revisited old interviews, and occasionally re-interviewed witnesses in the hope that something overlooked might reveal a clue. Each passing year, however, increased the difficulty of uncovering the truth as memories faded, leads grew stale, and potential witnesses passed away or relocated, leaving the case shrouded in mystery. And yet, despite decades of frustration, the cold case era also laid the foundation for future breakthroughs. Every note, every photograph, and every small clue collected during these years became invaluable for later investigators. Unbeknownst to the public and even some officers, the seeds of the eventual resolution were quietly being planted, waiting for the moment when modern technology and relentless determination would finally shine a light on the long-hidden truth: the anonymous tip. After 25 years of silence, when the memory of the seven cousins' disappearance had nearly become a legend, the case suddenly surged back into the public eye. It all began with an anonymous tip, a cryptic phone call to the FBI that hinted at secrets long buried. The tip was brief, almost casual in tone, but it contained details no stranger could have known. The call mentioned Lake Hollow specifically, recalling the exact location where the cousins had vanished. It hinted at events that had gone unnoticed by investigators in the 1990s. Though lacking in names or direct accusations, the tip was enough to catch the attention of federal authorities. After decades of cold leads, this single piece of information reignited a flurry of activity. Initially, agents were skeptical. Anonymous tips often led to dead ends or false alarms. Yet, the specificity of this one, combined with references to details from the original investigation, suggested authenticity. It became immediately clear that ignoring it was not an option. The case that had long seemed unsolvable suddenly had a pulse. The tip also implied knowledge of criminal activity surrounding Lake Hollow, a shadowy presence that had remained hidden all these years. It suggested that the cousin's disappearance was not an accident, nor a simple tragedy, but something intentional and possibly orchestrated. Investigators felt a chill. For the first time in decades, the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fit into a darker picture. Following the tip, the FBI began reopening files with renewed vigor. Old photographs were re-examined, witness statements cross-referenced, and evidence that had once been overlooked was now scrutinized using modern investigative techniques. The anonymous caller's information acted as a guide, pointing agents to details that had previously been considered insignificant. Investigators also began tracing the origins of the call, attempting to identify the mysterious informant. Every possible lead was analyzed: phone records, potential locations, and behavioral patterns. But the caller remained elusive, adding an additional layer of intrigue. Who had waited 25 years to come forward, and why now? The questions themselves became part of suspense surrounding the case. The tip led to the discovery of subtle inconsistencies in the original investigation, evidence that had been misfiled, overlooked, or dismissed. New connections were drawn, and the outline of a hidden criminal operation around the lake began to emerge. Each revelation was chilling, revealing the depth of planning behind the cousin's disappearance and how close the town had unknowingly been to danger. Community members who had lived with fear for decades watched in disbelief as the case re-entered the spotlight. Old journalists revisited stories, and townspeople whispered about the call that might finally expose the truth. After years of rumors and speculation, the anonymous tip had transformed the cold, silent mystery into an active pursuit for answers. For the families of the missing cousins, the anonymous tip was a mixture of hope and apprehension. After 25 years, it was difficult to imagine that resolution was even possible. Yet, the very idea that anyone had come forward with knowledge stirred emotions long buried, reigniting a flicker of belief that the truth might finally be uncovered. And so, what had begun as a brief, mysterious phone call became the catalyst for one of the most significant breakthroughs in the case. The anonymous tip was a key, turning decades of cold darkness into a path toward discovery. It set the stage for advanced forensic analysis, detailed investigative work, and the eventual unraveling of a story that had remained hidden for a quarter of a century: advanced forensics. With the anonymous tip guiding the investigation, the FBI turned to the latest advances in forensic science to breathe new life into the decades-old case. What had once been a frustrating lack of evidence now became a treasure trove in the hands of modern technology. Every photograph, fingerprint, and scrap of material evidence was reevaluated under a lens capable of uncovering secrets that had remained hidden for 25 years. DNA analysis, which in the late 1990s was limited and slow, now allowed investigators to detect minute traces of biological material. Even a single hair, a tiny drop of blood, or fibers embedded in clothing could provide clues about the cousin's final moments. Forensic teams meticulously combed through old evidence boxes, aware that even the smallest overlooked detail might finally unlock the mystery. Digital forensics also became a critical tool. Although 1997 was long before smartphones and modern social media, old phone records, pagers, and computer logs were now re-examined. Investigators cross-referenced these records with newer technology, seeking patterns and connections that had previously been invisible. Every keystroke and phone call from decades ago became a potential piece of the puzzle. Environmental forensics played a role as well. Soil samples, water analysis, and traces left along the lake and forest edges were re-evaluated using modern scientific techniques. These tests revealed patterns that had gone unnoticed during the initial investigation, including indications that the cousins had been in areas of the lake where they were not expected, hinting at a possible confrontation or struggle. Forensic anthropology was brought in to analyze skeletal remains that had been discovered near the forest edge, but had never been conclusively linked to the case. Using cutting-edge scanning and reconstruction technology, experts could now identify characteristics that matched the missing cousins, allowing investigators to establish timelines, movements, and even possible perpetrators' methods. Handwriting and document analysis also resurfaced as critical. Notes, maps, and other paper evidence from the original investigation were re-examined with improved magnification, chemical analysis of inks, and digital enhancement. Investigators discovered subtle clues, directions, annotations, and hidden symbols that suggested the presence of criminal activity and premeditation. Forensic psychology complemented the scientific analysis. Behavioral experts reconstructed the likely mindset of anyone involved in the disappearance, drawing on evidence collected from decades of research and criminal profiling. Their insights helped the FBI narrow down suspects and understand how the perpetrators had manipulated the environment to cover their tracks so effectively. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from revisiting witness statements using cognitive interviewing techniques. These methods, unavailable in the 1990s, allowed investigators to elicit more accurate memories from those who had been present during the events leading up to the disappearance. Even decades-old recollections became a vital source of information when cross-checked with forensic findings. The combination of these advanced methods revealed a chilling picture. The cousins' disappearance was deliberate, calculated, and tied to a hidden network operating in and around Lake Hollow. The science not only confirmed suspicions, but also uncovered details that human memory alone could never provide, including subtle traces of movement, hidden interactions, and overlooked items that were finally brought to light. With each new forensic discovery, the investigation shifted from speculation to concrete evidence. The lake, the forest, and even the seemingly innocuous objects that had surrounded the cousins' last known moments began to tell a story of careful planning, of danger concealed beneath natural beauty, and of crimes that had remained hidden until technology and perseverance could finally expose them. The chilling discovery. As the advanced forensic investigation progressed, the FBI uncovered something far more sinister than anyone had anticipated. Evidence revealed that the 7 cousins had not simply wandered into danger by accident. They had stumbled upon something they were never meant to see. What had appeared to be an idyllic lake trip now emerged as the setting of a hidden, calculated crime. Investigators discovered signs of clandestine operation hidden deep within the forest surrounding Lake Hollow. Small, concealed structures, makeshift campsites, and traces of activity suggested that a group had been conducting illicit operations in complete secrecy. The cousins' presence, innocuous in their eyes, had inadvertently placed in the path of these dangerous individuals. Even more chilling was the realization that the cousins had likely witnessed something crucial, an event, an interaction, or a transaction, that put them at immediate risk. Their sudden disappearance aligned with the timeline of this hidden activity, indicating that their removal was premeditated rather than random. The forest and lake, once seen as peaceful, were now understood as deliberately manipulated environments to hide criminal behavior. Traces of struggle and hurried movement were identified near the lake's edge, confirming that the cousins had been confronted. Tiny pieces of fabric, footprints, and disturbed vegetation suggested that at least some of them had resisted or tried to escape. Every detail painted a disturbing picture of fear, confusion, and an abrupt interruption of what should have been a carefree summer evening. The FBI's forensic team also uncovered evidence pointing to multiple perpetrators. This wasn't the act of a lone individual, but a coordinated effort. Tools, discarded items, and patterns of concealment indicated planning and experience. It became apparent that the cousins had inadvertently challenged a group that was methodical and ruthless, capable of erasing almost all traces of their presence. Investigators found subtle hints of intimidation in the surroundings. Certain areas were marked or cleared in ways that suggested surveillance and control, almost like warnings that outsiders were not welcome. These hidden indicators, unnoticed by anyone at the time, explained why the cousins' disappearance had been so complete. Everything had been designed to erase evidence and avoid detection. Psychological profiling added depth to the chilling revelation. Experts reconstructed the likely scenario. The cousins, unaware of the threat, had observed a secret they were never supposed to know. The perpetrators had acted quickly, exploiting both the isolation of the lake and the inexperience of the young group. This level of planning suggested a history of criminal activity that had gone undetected for years. Every recovered clue, no matter how small, contributed to the larger picture. Disturbed soil, fingerprints, and items hidden in the forest began to form a narrative of entrapment and concealment. The cousins' natural curiosity and adventurous spirit had tragically placed them in a position where mere observation became a deadly risk. The quiet lake, the serene forest, they were accomplices to a crime in their silence. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigators themselves. What had started as a cold case with limited evidence transformed into a story of deliberate, calculated crime. The idea that the cousins' disappearance had been orchestrated, rather than accidental, reshaped the investigation entirely. The narrative shifted from tragic mystery to planned abduction, raising the stakes of the search for justice. With the chilling discovery, the case took on a new dimension of urgency and gravity. The FBI now had the pieces of a puzzle that, while horrifying, were finally beginning to fit together. They could trace the steps, map the encounters, and understand the deadly sequence of events that had unfolded in the shadows of Lake Hollow. The investigation had moved from speculation into revelation, uncovering a truth far darker than anyone had imagined. Tracking the perpetrators. With the chilling discovery confirming that the cousins' disappearance had been deliberate, the FBI shifted focus to tracking the perpetrators. The anonymous tip, combined with forensic evidence, allowed investigators to identify patterns in the movements and behaviors of those responsible. Every footprint, fiber, and trace became a breadcrumb, leading deeper into a hidden network of criminal activity. Investigators quickly realized they were dealing with individuals who had been meticulous in covering their tracks. The disappearance had been orchestrated with precision, leaving almost no direct evidence behind. Yet, using modern technology and decades of experience, the FBI began reconstructing the steps the perpetrators had taken, almost like unraveling a carefully woven tapestry. Surveillance techniques were employed to monitor suspects' current activities. Even though the crimes occurred 25 years ago, some perpetrators had remained in the area, living seemingly ordinary lives. Observing their routines, cross-referencing old and new records, and identifying inconsistencies became crucial in building a profile of the individuals involved. Digital forensic tools played a pivotal role in tracking the perpetrators. Investigators examined archived phone records, old property transactions, and even early computer data. Each piece of information revealed connections between the suspects and locations near Lake Hollow. Over time, these digital footprints began to form a map of potential involvement, narrowing the field of investigation. Witness interviews also provided critical insight. By revisiting old statements and applying modern cognitive interviewing techniques, agents uncovered previously overlooked details. Neighbors, former colleagues, and acquaintances began to recall strange behaviors, unexplained absences, and subtle hints that had seemed insignificant at the time but now fit perfectly into the emerging narrative. The FBI also employed behavioral profiling to predict the perpetrator's next moves. Patterns of decision-making, risk-taking, and concealment were analyzed to understand how these individuals operated. Profilers concluded that the suspects were highly organized, with the ability to manipulate both people and the environment to avoid detection, a skill that had allowed them to remain hidden for decades. Physical evidence that had been dormant for years suddenly gained new relevance. For example, fragments of clothing and tools recovered near the lake were compared to known databases, providing matches to individuals who had previously escaped suspicion. Every tiny connection strengthened the trail, transforming decades-old ambiguity into a focused investigation. Geographic profiling also helped locate key areas tied to the perpetrator's activities. Investigators mapped patterns around Lake Hollow, identifying hidden paths, abandoned structures, and areas where evidence had been deliberately obscured. These locations revealed how the perpetrators had used the natural landscape to their advantage, turning the forest and lake into both weapon and shield. As the pieces came together, the network behind the disappearance began to emerge. The perpetrators were not random criminals, but a coordinated group experienced in deception and concealment. Each act of misdirection they had employed in 1997 was now being unraveled, and the FBI could trace a chain of actions leading to the cousins' vanishing. Slowly, methodically, the investigation closed in on the perpetrators. Every clue, no matter how small, was critical in establishing their identities and understanding the mechanics of the crime. The decades of silence, secrecy, and fear were being replaced with a calculated strategy to hold the responsible parties accountable. The hunt that had started with 7 missing cousins was now a high-stakes pursuit for justice, and the perpetrators could no longer hide in the shadows. Justice after 25 years. After decades of unanswered questions, the painstaking investigation finally began to yield results. With modern forensic techniques, witness testimony, and a network of leads from the anonymous tip, the FBI was able to identify and apprehend the perpetrators responsible for the cousins' disappearance. The breakthrough brought a mix of relief, disbelief, and anticipation for those who had long sought closure. Arrests were carried out carefully, with law enforcement ensuring that every procedure was followed to avoid mistakes. The suspects, some of whom had lived normal lives for decades, were suddenly confronted with the consequences of their past actions. The tension was palpable as the community watched the culmination of years of painstaking work unfold before their eyes. Court proceedings began, revealing the full extent of the criminal operation surrounding Lake Hollow. Testimonies, evidence, and forensic findings painted a chilling picture of premeditation and concealment. The cousins had inadvertently stumbled upon a secret, and the perpetrators had acted with ruthless efficiency to cover their tracks, believing they would escape justice forever. Families of the missing cousins were finally able to witness tangible progress. After 25 years of uncertainty, grief, and lingering hope, the trial offered a path to answers. While nothing could replace the loss or erase the trauma, seeing the perpetrators held accountable brought a sense of validation for the decades of suffering endured by the families. The court proceedings also highlighted the role of perseverance in solving cold cases. The FBI's dedication, combined with advances in forensic science, demonstrated that time, while it may delay justice, cannot entirely prevent it. Each piece of evidence, no matter how small, had contributed to exposing a truth that had been carefully hidden for a quarter of a century. The community itself began to feel a sense of collective relief. Lake Hollow, once a symbol of fear and mystery, gradually became a site of remembrance and reflection. Residents could finally acknowledge the courage of investigators and the resilience of families who had endured years of uncertainty, realizing that justice, even delayed, could still be achieved. Media coverage of the arrests and trials reignited national attention on the case. The story of the 7 cousins captured the public imagination, not just the mystery of their disappearance, but also for the extraordinary persistence and expertise that led to the resolution. The narrative shifted from tragedy to a testament of investigative skill and determination. For the perpetrators, the consequences were severe and unavoidable. Sentences reflected the gravity of their crimes, and the trial ensured that their attempts to erase history were thoroughly documented and scrutinized. The legal process reinforced the principle that accountability can reach even those who believe decades of silence will protect them. For the survivors' families, the final verdict offered more than just justice. It offered a framework for healing. Though the pain of loss could not be undone, the acknowledgement of truth allowed them to reclaim part of the life that had been overshadowed by fear and uncertainty. The legal resolution, combined with public acknowledgement, transformed their grief into a sense of closure. The aftermath of the trial served as a powerful reminder that justice can persevere, even against the passage of time. The decades-long effort underscored the importance of relentless pursuit, advanced technology, and meticulous investigation. For the town, the families, and the nation, it was a lesson in patience, determination, and the unyielding pursuit of truth, setting the stage for reflection on the resilience of both human spirit and justice. Closing in reflection, the story of the 7 cousins who vanished at Lake Hollow is more than a tale of mystery. It is a testament to the enduring pursuit of truth. For 25 years, the community lived under a shadow of uncertainty, and the families of the missing children carried grief that could not be measured. Yet, the eventual unraveling of the case shows how resilience, patience, and determination can overcome even decades of silence. The lake itself, once a place of innocent summer joy, stands as a silent witness to history. Its waters reflect not only the natural beauty of North Carolina, but also the layers of secrecy, fear, and, eventually, justice that unfolded over a quarter of a century. Each ripple of the lake seems to echo the voices of those who disappeared, reminding us that even in stillness, truth can find a way to surface. One of the most profound lessons from this case is the importance of vigilance. Ordinary moments, such as a summer trip with cousins, can unexpectedly intersect with forces beyond our understanding. While life often seems predictable, The events at Lake Hollow show that danger can exist even in serene places, and awareness and care are vital for protecting those we love. The role of technology and forensic advancement cannot be overstated. What seemed unsolvable in 1997 became tractable in 2022 thanks to the persistence of investigators, modern tools, and renewed attention sparked by an anonymous tip. This teaches us that innovation and determination together can uncover truths long hidden, proving that time does not render accountability impossible. Reflection on the family's endurance is equally important. For 25 years, they held on to hope while enduring unimaginable uncertainty. Their ability to continue searching for answers, to support one another, and to keep the memory of the cousins alive demonstrates extraordinary resilience. Their journey reminds us that even in prolonged suffering, hope can persist. The case also highlights the human capacity for justice, even after decades of delay. It shows that crimes, no matter how well concealed, eventually face exposure when investigation is relentless and meticulous. For the perpetrators, this represents the principle that time alone cannot shield wrongdoing from accountability. For the broader community, the story of Lake Hollow became a shared memory, a source of collective grief, and eventually collective relief. It demonstrates how tragedies ripple beyond immediate families, affecting neighbors, friends, and entire towns. The shared experience created a sense of unity, even amidst fear, and underscores the importance of solidarity in the face of the unknown. The emotional impact of the resolution cannot be overlooked. For the families, justice brought validation and a form of closure, even if it could not erase the past. For the town, it allowed a return to a semblance of normalcy, a reclaiming of spaces that had once been tainted by fear. The story reminds us that truth and justice can heal, even slowly, the wounds inflicted by unimaginable events. This narrative also forces reflection on fragility and unpredictability of life. 7 young lives vanished in an instant, altering countless others forever. It prompts us to value our loved ones, cherish fleeting moments, and remain mindful that the unexpected can disrupt the ordinary. The story of Lake Hollow, while tragic, encourages awareness, empathy, and caution. Ultimately, the case of the 7 cousins is a testament to perseverance, human ingenuity, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. It shows that mysteries, no matter how deeply buried in time, can be unraveled with patience, determination, and collaboration. The echoes of Lake Hollow serve as both a warning and an inspiration, that truth, though delayed, can never be fully silenced, and that justice, even after decades, remains possible.